Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Elise. Today I have a Thanksgiving card featuring some techniques with Distress Oxide inks. The stamp and dies that I'm using today come from the Stamp Market. Here's a quick overview of the supplies I'm going to use. This is the stamp and die set, lots of leaves from the Stamp Market. Just a cute smaller set, so it's at a great price point. I'm going to be using some Canson XL watercolor paper. I end up cutting this sheet in half. This watercolor paper is great because it has a smooth side and a texturized side, and it's at a really good price point. I'm going to use 3 colors of Distress Oxide, Fire Brick, Spice Marmalade, and Fossilized Amber. And then the star of my show today is really going to be my heat tool. It's a Wagner heat tool. This is a little bit on the pricey side for a heat tool, but as somebody who used a different heat tool for a while, I can tell you this is 100% worth it. I'm also going to be using some embossing powder from Wow. So I'm just going to go ahead and lay some color down. I want these leaves to look like they have just fallen and they're really embodying the colors of fall. So getting those down, adding some water with from a distress sprayer. And then I'm just going to lay my watercolor paper over top and just smush it on. And it kind of mixes all of the colors together and creates a really beautiful background. So I'm just going to go ahead and heat set this first layer with Distress Oxide inks, wet on wet blends, but wet on dry layers. So I want to get a second layer on top of this to add more dimension to the color. So I'm going to make sure that this is really good and dry before I go in with the second layer. And I'm going to use the ink that is already left over on there. I'm not going to go back in and add more ink, just use what's already there to kind of conserve my inks. So again, going to completely and totally dry this because I am going to be doing some heat embossing on this. And so I need to make sure it's completely and totally dry so that the powder doesn't stick. Also, to ensure that the powder does not stick to places I don't want it, I use my anti-static powder bag. So I'm going to take some Versamark ink and the individual leaves from the stamp set. This stamp set is basically like patterned leaves. So I took a couple of the ones that I really loved. I think that there was maybe 1 or 2 more that I did not use. So there's quite a variety. And then I'm going to add my embossing powder. This is Wow Embossing's Pale Rich Gold. Just going to add that on. Mainly at this point, I'm adding it on so that I can see where I've already laid down some of the leaves. So now I've got that set. Just going to set that aside for a second. And then I'll be able to take my heat gun and set this embossing powder. My heat gun was already pretty hot from me drying the watercolor panel before, so I didn't need it to warm it up too much, and because it was so hot, the melting of the embossing powder went really, really quickly. I love how the gold looks with these colors. I think it just really ties in the feeling of fall. So now for the sentiment, I am using the Thankful sentiment that comes in that set. It's kind of like a scripty Thankful. And I think it's really, really cute. Again, I'm going to use that same embossing powder. I think in this season, it's really important for us to remember what we're thankful for and the people that we're thankful for. So I'll be sending this to somebody as a Thanksgiving card to let them know that I'm thankful for them. So just heat setting that sentiment, and then I'm going to be running everything through the die cut machine. So now I will be cutting my card base. This is a Neenah Solar White 110 pound. Just cutting that down so that it is 4 1/4 by 11, and then I'll score it at 5 1/2 to make a top folding card base. I think that this card also would have looked great on ivory cardstock, but I also really like it on white. I need to remember to use more ivory as card bases. I pretty much only ever use my white. So now I am going to stack up. I cut a few extra thankfuls so that the sentiment really pops up off those leaves. So I'm just going to stack them and glue them together. That is Gina K Connect glue. Right now, that's my favorite liquid glue. I think it does a really good job holding everything together. And I've just really discovered a love for liquid glue because you have a little bit of extra time to move things around. With a lot of the other adhesives, there's not a lot of wiggle room on time. And I find that I often need to reposition, especially when it comes to trying to get margins right and make sure everything is straight and even. So liquid glue has been my new friend. So now I've got a panel, just a white panel, and I'm laying out these leaves, and I've got this really sped up at this point too, because I sat here for quite a while trying to decide what kind of a pattern I wanted these in. I kind of wanted it to look random, but also uniform at the same time. For a while, I thought maybe I'd lay them out like in straight rows. That was too uniform. Trying to find a good balance. And I feel like I finally found one with kind of like a staggered look. It almost reminds me of like, if you ever draw polka dots, this is how I draw polka dots so that it looks more even. I am not the most creative person, and I always want things to look a certain way, mainly nearly perfect or as close as I can get to it. So this is often how I end up landing on kind of a random pattern. So I'm just going ahead and gluing these down. This time I'm just using tape runner because it's just easier. And then I've got my panel. So just trying to see how it's all going to line up. I know I've got to cut down or at least cut off the edges of those leaves. And I end up cutting this panel down to be 3 3/4 by 5. So I end up taking 1/2 inch off widthwise and lengthwise in the end. And that gives you a really good margin around. I could have also used like a stitch rectangle die to cut this out, but with those leaves, I think it probably would have taken a couple passes through the machine. So I just thought I'll just cut it myself. So adding some glue to that thankful sentiment, trying to decide where I'm going to line it up. I do end up grabbing a T-square ruler just again to make sure that that is straight. I've had so many problems lately with being straight and the alignment being right and all of those things. So that was important. So grab the T-square, just setting some acrylic blocks on it for a second to kind of set that down, pressing it down. This glue dries pretty quickly. And I've got this sped up 4 times. So it sat on there longer than you think it maybe did. Now adding some more Connect glue to the back. And then I'm going to take my card base and add this to the front. Making sure that is straight. I looked at it, did not think it was straight. Brought back out my T-roller. And I end up peeling it up just a little bit and moving it, but it was still wet enough. The glue was, nowhere close to being set. So it was easy to make that adjustment. And now my card is straight, which is very, very important. So that's the card for today. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments down below what cards you are making for this Thanksgiving. I think everybody's already so focused on Christmas cards, but we still have Thanksgiving cards to make. So I'm trying to remember to make those myself. If you're interested in more from me, I'd love it if you'd subscribe. Thank you so much and have a great day.